Know your place, girl, Captain James Caldwell snarled, his hand crashing against Nia Thompson's cheek in the stunned silence of Sky Vista Airlines business class. The sharp slap echoed, eyes wide on the young black woman, her radiant ebony skin marked red, yet her wavy black hair framed a gaze of unyielding steel. What began as a routine flight from Chicago to Dubai spiraled into a seismic clash of arrogance and concealed power. A single phone call would shatter the pilot's world, chaining him in handcuffs and toppling an airline's facade. This isn't merely a tale of conflict, it's a storm of justice that will hold you captive until its breathtaking end. If this grips your soul, smash that subscribe button and drop a note about where and when you're watching. Let's see how this story ripples across the globe. The hum of Sky Vista Airlines' Airbus A350 was a velvet murmur, a soothing pulse that cradled the elite passengers of business class as they soared 35,000 feet above the Midwest, bound for Dubai. The cabin was a sanctuary of luxury. Creamy leather seats gleamed under soft amber lighting. The air carried a faint whisper of peppermint and cedarwood, and the clink of crystal glassware punctuated the quiet. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, stars glinting like diamonds against an inky void. Inside, the world felt curated, untouchable, a bubble of privilege slicing through the heavens. In seat 2B, Nia Thompson sat poised, an enigma amid the tailored suits and designer watches. At 28, her radiant ebony skin glowed under the cabin's glow, her long, wavy black hair cascading over the shoulders of her navy blazer, paired with crisp white trousers. A sleek pair of thin-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, framing eyes that flickered with quiet intensity. On her lap, a laptop displayed intricate AI-driven flight path optimizations, her fingers dancing across the keys with the precision of a pianist. To the casual observer, she was out of place, a young woman who didn't flaunt wealth with logos or jewels. But Nia was no ordinary passenger. She was the silent force behind Sky Vista, the CEO of Apex Ventures, holding a 60% stake in the airline through her shadowy investment firm. Her empire, built on a revolutionary AI algorithm, sold for $4 billion, operated in the shadows, and reshaped industries without fanfare. Across the aisle, a portly businessman in his 60s, clad in a pinstripe suit that strained at the seams, wrestled with an oversized carry-on. His face reddened as he shoved the bag into the overhead bin, muttering, "These compartments get smaller every damn year." The bag, a garish, monogrammed monstrosity, refused to fit, teetering precariously. Emily Chen, a 30-year-old flight attendant with neatly cropped brown hair and a pristine Sky Vista uniform, approached with a practiced smile. "Sir, I can check that bag for you," she offered, her voice smooth but firm. "It'll be waiting at the gate in Dubai." The man scoffed, his jowls quivering. "Check my Hermes. Do you know how much this costs, darling? More than your yearly salary." Emily's smile tightened, a flicker of frustration in her dark eyes, but she held her composure. "I understand, sir, but it exceeds carry-on size limits. It's a safety regulation." Before the man could retort, Nia's voice cut through the tension, calm and measured, without looking up from her laptop. "She's correct. FAA Regulation 121.589 specifies that unsecured objects over a certain mass can become hazardous in turbulence or decompression." Her tone was clinical, as if reciting a fact from memory, but it carried an unshakable authority. The cabin seemed to pause, the hum of the engines suddenly louder in the silence. The businessman gaped, his indignation faltering. Emily glanced at Nia, surprise softening her professional mask. "Who asked you?" the man snapped, his voice loud enough to draw glances from nearby passengers. Nia lifted her eyes, her gaze steady and unflinching, the deep brown irises holding a quiet fire. "I'm a passenger who'd rather not be struck by a flying briefcase," she said, her voice cool but edged with steel. "Let the flight attendant do her job." The businessman's face flushed a deeper crimson, but he was outmatched. With a grunt of defeat, he thrust the bag at Emily. "Fine. But if there's a single scratch, I'm suing this airline into oblivion." Emily nodded, her gratitude toward Nia conveyed in a fleeting glance as she carried the bag away. Nia returned to her laptop, the incident already a closed equation in her mind. She took a sip of her sparkling water, the lemon slice bobbing gently, and resumed her work, unaware that the real storm was about to emerge from the cockpit. The door to the flight deck swung open with a soft click, and out strode Captain James Caldwell, a 45-year-old man whose presence filled the cabin like a thundercloud. Tall and broad-shouldered, his silver-flecked hair and chiseled jaw gave him the look of a faded movie star, his navy uniform pristine, the 4 gold bars on his epaulets gleaming like a badge of royalty. His voice, a deep baritone, carried the weight of unchallenged authority. To Caldwell, this plane was his dominion, and every soul aboard, passengers, crew, even the air itself, was his to command. He wasn't here to greet passengers or inspect the cabin. He wanted coffee, real coffee, not the swill from the cockpit's machine. As he moved through the aisle, his eyes swept the cabin with a predator's appraisal. He noted the businessman, now sulking in his seat, with a curt nod of camaraderie. Then his gaze landed on Nia. His mind, a machine honed by decades of ingrained bias, made its calculations in an instant. A young black woman in a blazer, working on a laptop in business class? She was an interloper, perhaps a tech assistant, a lottery winner, or someone using stolen miles. His lip curled, a subtle sneer. To him, business class was a sacred space, its standards eroded by people like her. He couldn't see the AI data on her screen, only the glow, and assumed she was scrolling social media or streaming some inane show. Caldwell reached the galley, where Emily was arranging a tray of glassware. "Chen," he barked, making her jump. "The cockpit coffee tastes like motor oil. Get me a proper French press. Dark roast, now." Emily nodded, her hands moving quickly. "Of course, Captain. Right away." "What was that noise earlier?" he demanded, leaning against the counter as if holding court. "Sounded like a commotion." "Just a passenger's oversized bag, sir," Emily replied, keeping her tone neutral. "It's been handled." "Handled?" Caldwell snorted. "You need to be firmer with these people. They'll walk all over you if you let them, especially the ones who don't belong here." His words carried a venomous edge, his meaning unmistakable. Emily's stomach twisted, but she stayed silent, focusing on the coffee. Caldwell's attention drifted back to the cabin, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Nia's glass of sparkling water, placed slightly off the coaster on her tray table. It was a trivial oversight, but to him, it was a crack in the order he cherished. He stormed back into the cabin, his polished shoes clicking ominously on the floor. Stopping at Nia's seat, he loomed over her, his shadow swallowing the light from her laptop. "Miss," he said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "This isn't a dive bar. We use coasters for a reason. It protects the tray table's finish." Nia looked up, her concentration broken, her eyes meeting his without a trace of fear. She glanced at the glass, then the coaster an inch away. "My apologies," she said, her voice even, almost robotic in its calm. She reached for the glass, but Caldwell's hand shot out, snatching it first. "The crew aren't your maids," he snapped, his tone laced with condescension. "They have better things to do than clean up after passengers who can't follow basic etiquette." The rebuke was public, designed to shame. A woman in a silk scarf shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The businessman smirked, relishing the scene. Nia's jaw tightened, a slow burn of anger flickering beneath her composed exterior. She'd faced men like Caldwell before, men who saw her skin, her youth, her gender, and assumed they could belittle her. "I've apologized, Captain," she said, her voice dropping colder, sharper. "Your point is noted. I suggest you return to your duties." Her words were a dismissal, precise and unyielding, and they struck Caldwell like a blade. His face darkened, his authority challenged in a way he hadn't expected. The cabin held its breath, the tension coiling tighter. Nia returned her gaze to her laptop, but the air crackled with the promise of something explosive, something that would soon shatter the fragile order of Sky Vista's business class. The business class cabin of Sky Vista Airlines' flight to Dubai was a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken tension. The soft hum of the engines seemed to pulse louder, as if mirroring the racing hearts of the passengers who had just witnessed Captain James Caldwell's public rebuke of Nia Thompson. The young woman in seat 2B, her radiant ebony skin framed by long, wavy black hair, sat with her laptop open, her thin-rimmed glasses glinting under the cabin's amber glow. Her navy blazer and white trousers were immaculate, but her calm exterior masked a simmering fury. Caldwell's words, "The crew aren't your maids," still hung in the air, a deliberate attempt to humiliate her over a misplaced glass. The surrounding passengers, a mix of executives and affluent travelers, avoided her gaze, their discomfort palpable. The businessman with the Hermes bag smirked, savoring the spectacle, while a woman in a silk scarf clutched her armrest, her eyes darting nervously. Nia's fingers hovered over her keyboard, her mind recalibrating. She had faced men like Caldwell before, men who wielded their authority like a club, who saw her as less before they ever saw her mind. But this was her airline, her empire, and she would not be diminished. She met Caldwell's stare, her deep brown eyes unwavering, a quiet storm brewing within them. "I've apologized, Captain," she said, her voice low and precise, each word a measured strike. "Your point is noted. I suggest you return to your duties." The words landed like a gauntlet thrown at Caldwell's feet. His face, already flushed with self-righteous indignation, darkened further. The 4 gold bars on his epaulets seemed to gleam brighter, as if mocking the challenge to his dominion. To him, this plane was his kingdom, and Nia, a young black woman in a blazer, was a trespasser who dared to defy him. "My duties?" he growled, stepping closer, his tall frame casting a shadow over her seat. "My duties include keeping order on this aircraft, and you're disrupting it with your attitude." Nia's expression remained impassive, but her pulse quickened. She closed her laptop with a deliberate click, setting it on the seat beside her. "Disrupting?" she repeated, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "I cited FAA regulations to ensure safety, and I corrected a minor oversight with my glass. Your behavior, Captain, is the disruption. It's unprofessional and a violation of Sky Vista's Code of Conduct, Section 4.2, regarding passenger treatment." The cabin froze. Passengers exchanged glances, their murmurs silenced by the audacity of her response. Emily Chen, the flight attendant, hovered near the galley, her hands trembling as she gripped a tray. She knew Caldwell's temper, his reputation for writing up crew members for the smallest infractions. Intervening could end her career, but the scene unfolding before her was spiraling into something dangerous. The businessman's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of unease. The woman in the silk scarf pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the record button. Caldwell's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenching. Nia's knowledge of airline policy, her calm defiance, was a direct assault on his authority. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he spat, leaning in, his breath hot with stale coffee and rage. "I don't know what scam got you this seat, but you're out of your depth. This is my plane, and you will respect my rules." Nia stood, a fluid motion that belied the fire in her chest. At 28, she was not tall, but her posture radiated an authority that dwarfed Caldwell's bluster. Her wavy hair swayed slightly, framing her face like a crown. "Respect is earned, Captain," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Your actions, berating a passenger over a triviality, intimidating your crew, suggest you're unfit to lead this flight. I request you return to the cockpit and let the first officer handle departure." It was a calculated strike, precise and devastating. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't flinched, but she had questioned his competence in front of his passengers, his subjects. Caldwell's face twisted, a vein pulsing at his temple. To him, Nia was not just a passenger. She was a symbol of everything he despised, the erosion of his world where men like him no longer held unchallenged power. His mind, clouded by decades of unchecked prejudice, saw only a young black woman who needed to be put in her place. The cabin was a theater now, every eye locked on the standoff. Emily took a hesitant step forward, her training urging her to de-escalate, but Caldwell's presence was a wall of intimidation. "Captain," she began, her voice barely audible, but he cut her off with a glare. The businessman shifted in his seat, his earlier amusement gone, replaced by a dawning realization that this was no ordinary confrontation. Caldwell's right hand, adorned with a heavy gold ring, twitched. You don't tell me how to run my plane, he snarled, his voice a low, menacing growl. You're nothing but a troublemaker who doesn't belong here. The word troublemaker was laced with venom, a coded jab at her race, her gender, her presence in his sacred business class. He leaned closer, invading her space, his face inches from hers. Get your things, you're off this flight. Nia held his gaze, her eyes a furnace of controlled fury. I'm a paying passenger with every right to be here, she said, her voice steady as steel. Your behavior violates federal aviation law and airline policy. Step back, Captain, or you'll regret it. The threat was a spark to dry tinder. Something in Caldwell snapped, a lifetime of entitlement and unchecked power boiling over. In a horrifying blur, his hand rose, the gold ring glinting under the cabin lights. The passengers gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the air from the room. Emily froze, a small no escaping her lips. Nia saw it coming, her analytical mind calculating his trajectory, his intent. She had anticipated verbal aggression, perhaps an attempt to have her removed. She hadn't predicted this. The crack of his hand against her cheek was a gunshot in the silence, sharp and brutal. Nia's head snapped to the side, her wavy hair whipping through the air. The force of the slap sent a jolt of pain through her jaw, a bright red mark blooming on her radiant skin. For a heartbeat, the cabin was a vacuum, soundless, motionless. The only constant, the indifferent drone of the engines. The businessman's jaw dropped, his smugness obliterated. The woman in the silk scarf hit record, her hands shaking. Emily rushed forward, her tray clattering to the floor. Nia slowly turned her head back, her glasses slightly askew, but her eyes blazing with a fury that could melt steel. She didn't touch her cheek, didn't cry out, didn't flinch. She stared at Caldwell, and in that moment, the captain saw something that chilled him. A cold, calculating resolve that wasn't fear or submission, but the promise of annihilation. You've just destroyed yourself, she said, her voice a whisper that carried the weight of a death sentence. Caldwell blinked, a flicker of panic breaking through his rage. He looked at his hand, then at the red mark on Nia's face, as if realizing the magnitude of his mistake. But his pride wouldn't let him retreat. You're a security threat, he boomed, his voice trembling with forced authority. You're off my plane, now! He pointed toward the open door, his hands shaking. Nia's gaze didn't waver. She picked up her laptop and backpack with deliberate calm, her movements precise, almost ceremonial. As she walked toward the exit, she paused beside Emily, who stood trembling, tears in her eyes. Thank you for trying, Nia said softly, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. Then she turned to Caldwell, her eyes locking onto his one last time. This will be addressed, she said, her words a blade that cut through the stunned silence. With that, she stepped into the jet bridge, leaving behind a cabin in disarray, a terrified crew, and a captain who had just ignited a fuse he could not extinguish. The jet bridge of Chicago O'Hare International Airport was a sterile tunnel, its gray walls and fluorescent lights a stark contrast to the opulent warmth of Sky Vista Airlines business class. Nia Thompson strode through it with measured steps, her navy blazer slightly rumpled, her long, wavy black hair swaying with each deliberate movement. The red mark on her radiant ebony cheek throbbed, a dull pulse of pain that anchored her to the moment. But her mind, sharp as a blade, was already racing ahead, processing not the sting of Captain James Caldwell's slap, but the audacity of his actions, and the systemic rot that allowed it. Her thin-rimmed glasses glinted under the harsh lights, her eyes burning with a cold, analytical fury. In her hand, her phone felt like a loaded weapon, and she was about to pull the trigger. Nia emerged into the bustling chaos of the terminal, the clamor of announcements and rolling suitcases a distant hum to her focused mind. She bypassed the gate agent's desk, where a young man in a Sky Vista polo stammered, his eyes widening at the vivid handprint on her face. "Ma'am, are you?" he began, but Nia raised a hand, silencing him with a single gesture. "I need the tail number of that aircraft," she said, her voice flat, devoid of warmth, but commanding absolute compliance. The agent blinked, fumbling with his tablet. It's N732SV, November 732, Sierra Victor. Nia nodded, committing the number to memory with the precision of a computer. Thank you. Without another word, she turned and found a quiet corner near a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the tarmac. The Airbus A350 she just left gleamed under the floodlights, its sleek lines a mockery of the chaos it had just hosted. Her plane, her asset. And yet a man like Caldwell had dared to lay hands on her. The insult wasn't personal, it was structural, a symptom of a diseased system she'd failed to diagnose. But that was about to change. She pulled out her phone, her thumb navigating to an encrypted contact labeled simply LR. Lucas Reed, her lawyer and the public face of Apex Ventures, was more than a legal mind. He was a surgical instrument, a man who wielded contracts and clauses with the precision of a scalpel. At 50, with silver hair and a voice that could charm or destroy, Lucas had been with Nia since her teenage years, when she was coding AI algorithms in a cramped dorm room. He answered on the first ring, his tone warm but edged with concern. Nia, you're supposed to be halfway to Dubai. What's wrong? There's been an incident, Nia said, her voice a low, controlled burn, each syllable weighted with purpose. I was assaulted and removed from Sky Vista Flight 732, tail number N732SV. The assailant was the pilot, Captain James Caldwell. A dead silence stretched across the line, the kind that precedes a storm. Lucas Reed had navigated hostile takeovers and government probes, but this was a thunderbolt. Assaulted, he repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, disbelief warring with menace. Are you hurt? Do you need a medical team? I can have people at O'Hare in 15 minutes. The injury is superficial, Nia replied, touching her cheek briefly, the pain a mere data point. The problem is deeper. Caldwell's behavior, his entitlement, his aggression, points to a culture I've overlooked. He fabricated a report, Lucas, labeling me a security threat to cover his actions. He's violated FAA protocols, including using his personal phone in the cockpit during pre-flight. I want him buried. Lucas exhaled, his mind already shifting into high gear. Understood. What are your orders? Initiate Apex Protocol, Nia commanded, her voice unwavering, invoking the doomsday clause of her shareholder agreement. It was a mechanism she'd designed for moments like this, a total activation of her authority as Sky Vista's majority owner. Freeze all executive functions under Clause 19C. I want a full audit of Sky Vista's operations, starting with Caldwell's history. Pull his FAA records, union files, financials, and even his personal communications. I want to know his every move. Lucas's pen scratched furiously in the background, his voice crisp with purpose. Clause 19C, complete shareholder override. I'll have the board's authority locked down by morning. Caldwell's file will be on your desk within the hour. What else? Ground the crew of Flight 732 in Dubai, Nia said. I want interviews with every member, especially the flight attendant, Emily Chen. She tried to intervene, however briefly. She's an asset, protect her. No retaliation, no intimidation. Make that clear. Done, Lucas said. And Caldwell? Nia's gaze fixed on the plane, her plane, still idling on the tarmac. Contact the FAA. Inform them that an unnamed corporate auditor was assaulted by a pilot who then falsified an incident report to label her a security threat. Highlight his use of a personal device in the cockpit, a direct violation of FAA Regulation 91.221. It's enough to trigger an immediate investigation and suspend his license. Let's see how he likes being grounded. Lucas let out a low, appreciative whistle. That's a masterstroke, Nia. The FAA will swarm him like hornets. He'll be tangled in red tape before he knows what hit him, and the airline won't be able to bury this. They'll be too busy explaining themselves. Don't apologize, Lucas, Nia said, her voice dropping to a chilling register as she cut off his next words. Be relentless. She ended the call, slipping the phone into her pocket. Outside, the plane's engines began to spool up, a low roar signaling its imminent departure. Nia watched it taxi away, a ghost ship carrying a captain who thought he'd won. Caldwell, in his arrogance, had no idea he'd just struck the match that would burn his world to ash. Back on the aircraft, the cabin buzzed with unease. Passengers whispered, their phones glowing as they texted or uploaded shaky videos of the incident. Emily Chen stood in the galley, her hands still trembling as she cleaned up the tray she'd dropped. Her dark eyes were haunted, replaying the moment Caldwell's hand struck Nia's face. She'd wanted to do more, to stop him, but the weight of his authority had paralyzed her. Now guilt gnawed at her. She glanced at the empty seat 2B, the coaster still askew, a silent rebuke of her inaction. In the cockpit, Caldwell settled into his seat, his chest puffed with self-righteous triumph. "Problem handled," he grunted to his first officer, a younger man named Tom, who shifted uncomfortably. "Some passengers need to learn their place." He adjusted his headset, his gold ring glinting as he gripped the controls. The plane accelerated down the runway, lifting into the night sky with a graceful arc. Caldwell felt invincible, the king of his domain, oblivious to the storm gathering on the ground. Nia turned from the window, her mind already mapping the next moves. The slap wasn't just an assault on her, it was an indictment of Sky Vista's culture, a failure she'd allowed to fester. But she was no victim. She was a strategist, a billionaire who'd built empires from code and calculation. As she walked toward the airport's VIP lounge, her steps echoed with purpose. Caldwell had mistaken her silence for weakness, her youth for insignificance. He'd learned soon enough that he'd struck not just a passenger, but the architect of his downfall. The phone call she'd just made wasn't a cry for help. It was the opening salvo in a war that would reshape an airline and destroy a man's career. The Airbus A350 touched down in Dubai with the grace of a swan, its wheels kissing the tarmac under a sky bruised with the first light of dawn. Inside the business-class cabin of Sky Vista Airlines Flight 732, the air was heavy with the aftershocks of the earlier confrontation. Passengers, still rattled, gathered their belongings in near silence, their whispers drowned by the whine of the engines winding down. The plush leather seats and peppermint-scented air felt hollow now, tainted by the memory of Captain James Caldwell's slap against Nia Thompson's cheek. The red mark on her radiant ebony skin had become a silent accusation, etched in the minds of those who'd witnessed it. Emily Chen, the flight attendant, moved through the cabin with mechanical precision, her cropped brown hair framing a face tight with guilt and dread. She avoided looking at seat 2B, now empty, where Nia's calm defiance had clashed with Caldwell's rage. In the cockpit, Caldwell leaned back in his captain's chair, his silver-flecked hair slightly disheveled, his 4 gold bars glinting under the instrument panel's glow. He exuded a smug satisfaction, his earlier panic replaced by a delusion of victory. "Took care of that troublemaker," he muttered to his first officer, Tom, who nodded uneasily, his eyes fixed on the post-flight checklist. Caldwell's gold ring caught the light as he adjusted his headset, a symbol of his unchecked authority. He'd put the upstart in her place, reasserted his dominion over his plane. The world, as far as he was concerned, was back in order. But the world had shifted beneath him, and he was blissfully unaware of the trap closing in. As the jet bridge connected to the aircraft, a murmur rippled through the cabin. Passengers preparing to disembark froze as 3 figures in dark uniforms, aviation security officers, boarded with purposeful strides. Their boots thudded against the carpeted floor, a stark contrast to the cabin's refined elegance. The lead officer, a wiry man with a clipped British accent, scanned the cabin before locking eyes with Emily. "Where is Captain James Caldwell?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Emily's heart lurched. She pointed toward the cockpit, her hands trembling. He's up front, sir." The officer nodded, motioning for his colleagues to follow. Passengers craned their necks, phones already out, sensing the drama unfolding. The businessman with the Hermes bag, his earlier smirk long gone, clutched his phone, recording the scene. The woman in the silk scarf whispered to her seatmate, her eyes wide with anticipation. The cockpit door swung open, and Caldwell turned, expecting a routine debrief. His smug grin vanished as he saw the officers. "What's this about?" he barked, rising from his seat, his tall frame filling the cramped space. The lead officer stepped forward, his expression unyielding. "Captain James Caldwell, you are under arrest for falsifying an aviation security report and assaulting a passenger on Flight 732. Step out of the cockpit, hands where we can see them. Caldwell's face drained of color, his jaw slackening. This is absurd, he roared, his voice booming through the open door into the cabin. That woman was a threat. I was protecting my aircraft. But his protest faltered as the officer produced a pair of handcuffs, the steel glinting under the cabin lights. The second officer, a broad-shouldered woman, stepped closer, her hand resting on her radio. Step out, sir. Now! The cabin was a theater of stunned silence. Passengers and crew alike frozen as Caldwell emerged, his uniform rumpled, his authority crumbling. The lead officer spun him around, snapping the cuffs onto his wrists with a metallic click that echoed like a gavel. You're also under investigation for violating FAA Regulation 91Q1, use of a personal device in the cockpit during pre-flight operations. The officer continued, his voice cold and procedural. You'll be detained pending a full inquiry. Caldwell's eyes widened, a flicker of panic breaking through his bravado. The cockpit phone logs, accessed by Nia's legal team, had revealed his text to a colleague boasting about handling a passenger, sent minutes before takeoff. Combined with passenger videos capturing his assault, the evidence was a noose tightening around his career. He struggled briefly, his shoulders jerking against the cuffs, but the officers held firm, guiding him toward the jet bridge. Passengers parted like a sea, their phones raised, capturing every humiliating step. The businessman's hands shook as he filmed, his face pale. The woman in the silk scarf uploaded her video, the caption already forming. Pilot arrested on Sky Vista flight for assault. Emily stood rooted in the galley, her breath shallow. She'd seen Caldwell's temper before, heard whispers of his past infractions buried by the Union, but this was different. The speed, the decisiveness. It was as if an invisible force had orchestrated his downfall. She glanced at seat 2B, where Nia's sparkling water glass still sat, the lemon slice now wilted. Guilt clawed at her. She'd failed to stop him, but Nia's final words, "Thank you for trying," echoed in her mind, a small lifeline. As Caldwell was led through the jet bridge, his head bowed, the reality of his situation began to sink in. The officers' radios crackled with updates. The FAA was already reviewing his license, prompted by an anonymous tip from a high-level corporate auditor. The charge of falsifying a security report, claiming Nia was a threat to cover his assault, was a career ender, far graver than the assault itself. It was a federal offense, one that could lead to years behind bars. Caldwell's knees buckled slightly, but the officers steadied him, their grips unyielding. Outside, the Dubai tarmac shimmered with heat, the rising sun casting long shadows. The passengers disembarked in a daze, their whispers growing louder as they spilled into the terminal. Social media was already ablaze. Hashtags like Nearer Sky Vista Scandal and Pilot Arrest, trending as videos of the slap and Caldwell's arrest went viral. Emily lingered in the cabin, helping the last passengers with a forced smile. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Sky Vista pilot detained in Dubai for assault and falsifying reports. She opened the article, her breath catching as she saw a grainy still of Nia's face, the red mark stark against her skin. The article mentioned an unnamed passenger, but Emily sensed there was more to Nia than anyone knew. In the terminal, Caldwell was escorted to a holding area, his uniform a mockery of the authority he'd once wielded. He sat on a metal bench, the cuffs biting into his wrists, his mind racing. He'd thought Nia was a nobody, a freeloader who'd somehow conned her way into business class. Now doubt gnawed at him. How had the FAA moved so quickly? Who was she? The questions swirled, but no answers came. He stared at the floor, the weight of his actions crushing his bravado. He'd struck a passenger, lied to cover it, and now his 25-year career was unraveling in real time. Back in Chicago, Nia sat in the airport's VIP lounge, her laptop open, her fingers flying across the keys. The news alerts on her phone confirmed the arrest, but her focus was elsewhere, on the next phase of her plan. Lucas Reed's call had set the wheels in motion, and Apex Protocol was now a living, breathing force. Caldwell's arrest was just the beginning. The real battle would be fought in the boardroom, where Nia would reveal her true power and dismantle the system that had enabled him. As she sipped a fresh glass of sparkling water, The lemon slice bright in the morning light, her eyes gleamed with purpose. The plane had landed, but the storm was just beginning. The virtual boardroom of Sky Vista Airlines was a grid of anxious faces, each executive's image flickering on a secure video conference link from the company's Chicago headquarters. The digital silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of air conditioning in the background at precisely 10 a.m. Dubai time, the screens glowed with the weight of impending judgment. Michael Grant, the 55-year-old CEO, sat at the center of the grid, his salt and pepper hair meticulously combed, his navy suit crisp despite the sweat beading on his brow. He'd built Sky Vista into a brand synonymous with luxury, but now his polished charisma felt like a fragile mask. Flanking him were the head of legal, Susan Patel, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, and the COO, David Walsh, a heavy-set man whose nervous fidgeting betrayed his usual confidence. The head of flight operations, a grizzled veteran named Paul, looked pale, while the pilot union representative, a burly man named Victor, glared defiantly, ready to defend his own. One window remained black, labeled only Apex Ventures. It was a void that seemed to pulse with menace, a reminder of the invisible power that held Sky Vista's fate. The executives waited, their breaths shallow as the seconds ticked past. Michael's phone buzzed with a news alert. Sky Vista pilot arrested for assault and falsifying reports. Passenger videos were spreading like wildfire, the hashtag #JoshuSkyVista scandal trending globally. He'd skimmed the reports, a disruptive passenger, a minor incident, Caldwell's overzealous response. He'd planned a swift PR fix, fire the captain, offer the passenger free flights, and bury the story. But the invocation of Clause 19C, the shareholder override, had turned his world upside down. Apex Ventures, the silent majority owner, was about to speak, and Michael sensed a reckoning. The black window flickered to life, revealing Lucas Reed, the silver-haired lawyer whose gray suit and steely gaze exuded quiet menace. His minimalist office, with a view of Chicago's skyline, framed him like a general surveying a battlefield. "Good morning," Lucas began, his voice smooth as polished stone. "We're here to address a catastrophic failure on Sky Vista Flight 732, an asset of my client. This is not a discussion. This is a directive." Michael seized the moment, his CEO instincts kicking in. "Lucas, I'm horrified by Captain Caldwell's actions," he said, his voice dripping with rehearsed sincerity. "We're terminating him immediately and preparing a compensation package for the passenger. This was an isolated incident, and we're committed to—" Lucas raised a finger, silencing Michael as if flicking a switch. "You will speak when invited, Michael," he said, his tone chillingly polite. "This is not about one pilot. This is about your failure to maintain a culture that upholds Sky Vista's values. We have evidence. Passenger videos, crew statements, and FAA violations that expose a systemic rot. Allow me to show you." He shared his screen, and a grainy video filled the virtual room. The executives watched in stunned horror. Caldwell's sneer, his hand striking Nia Thompson's cheek, the sickening crack echoing through the cabin. Nia's calm retort, "You've just destroyed yourself," played like a prophecy. The video cut to Caldwell's arrest, his wrist cuffed as he was led off the plane, his face a mask of shock. Susan Patel gasped, covering her mouth. David Walsh's hands clenched into fists. Victor, the union rep, shifted uncomfortably, his defiance faltering. "This was not a disruptive passenger," Lucas continued, his voice ablade. "This was an assault by a captain with a history of aggression, enabled by a system that protected him. 3 prior complaints buried by your union, Victor, and a falsified report claiming the passenger was a security threat, compounded by his illegal use of a personal device in the cockpit. Your airline failed her, and it failed itself." Michael saw an opening, his voice rising with forced outrage. "This is indefensible. Sky Vista has zero tolerance for such behavior. We'll reach out to the victim with our deepest apologies and ensure—" Lucas's smile was a predator's baring of teeth. "You'll deliver your apology directly, Michael. My client has chosen to join us." A new window flickered on, revealing Nia Thompson. She sat in a sleek home office, her radiant ebony skin glowing under soft lighting, her long, wavy black hair framing a face marked by a faint bruise. Her navy blazer was gone, replaced by a charcoal turtleneck that radiated understated power. Her thin-rimmed glasses caught the light, her eyes locking onto the camera with a cold, unyielding intensity. The boardroom imploded in silence. Michael's breath caught, his mind stuttering as he recognized the woman from the video, the passenger, the victim. Susan Patel's pen dropped, clattering on her desk. Victor's jaw tightened, his bulldog bravado crumbling. David Walsh stared, piecing together the impossible. Lucas's voice rang with grim finality. "Gentlemen, ladies, meet Nia Thompson, principal owner of Apex Ventures and holder of 60% of Sky Vista Airlines. You work for her." The revelation was a thunderclap. Michael's polished facade shattered, his face paling as the dots connected. The passenger in 2B, her encyclopedic knowledge of regulations, her chilling promise. This will be addressed. He'd planned to placate a nobody with free tickets, unaware she was the billionaire who held his career in her hands. Victor muttered under his breath, his defense of Caldwell now a death sentence for his credibility. Susan's eyes darted to her legal notes, realizing no contract could shield them now. Nia spoke, her voice calm but merciless, a scientist dissecting a failed experiment. "Mr. Grant, for 3 years, I've trusted you to run my airline. I've read your glowing reports, approved your budgets, and believed your promises of excellence. Yesterday, I learned they were lies." She tilted her head, the bruise on her cheek catching the light. "This isn't my injury. It's your failure. A culture where a pilot felt entitled to assault a black woman based on her appearance, where a flight attendant was too intimidated to intervene, where passengers stood by until it was too late." Michael's voice was a croak. "Ms. Thompson, I'm horrified. This is a betrayal of everything we stand for. Will stop," Nia commanded, her voice slicing through his groveling. "You don't define what Sky Vista stands for. I do. You stand for a system that shielded Caldwell's aggression, that silenced Emily Chen's instincts, that failed every passenger in that cabin." She turned to Victor, her gaze a laser. "Your union will not defend Caldwell. Apex Ventures is filing a civil suit for assault and battery, and we're providing the FAA with evidence to revoke his license permanently. Obstruct this, and I'll renegotiate your contract with a new labor group." Victor nodded, mute, his fight extinguished. Nia's eyes returned to Michael, pinning him like a specimen. "You have 2 paths, Michael. I can sell my 60% stake today. The market will collapse, Sky Vista will be bankrupt by spring, and you'll be jobless. Or you remain as a figurehead CEO, your authority revoked, while we rebuild this airline from the ground up." She laid out her terms with surgical precision. First, Caldwell is fired, publicly, with a statement detailing his crimes. His pension is forfeit. Second, an independent oversight board will control hiring, firing, and training, led by my appointee. Third, a sanctuary protocol will protect employees reporting misconduct, reviewed by the board, not management. Fourth, Emily Chen is promoted and tasked with redesigning de-escalation training. Finally, you'll issue a public apology, naming Caldwell's assault on a black woman and admitting Sky Vista's failure. No vague excuses. Michael's shoulders slumped, his career hanging by a thread. "We accept," he whispered, the words tasting of ash. Nia's nod was sharp, her eyes unrelenting. The boardroom was a graveyard of egos, and Nia Thompson was its unyielding architect. 3 months had passed since the seismic confrontation on Sky Vista Airlines Flight 732, and the air in the business class cabin of a New York to San Francisco flight felt different. Lighter, as if the ghosts of that fateful day had been exorcised. The Airbus A350 hummed softly, its creamy leather seats and peppermint-scented air now infused with a quiet renewal. The bruise on Nia Thompson's radiant ebony cheek had long faded, but the mark she'd left on Sky Vista was indelible. She sat in the seat 2B, her long, wavy black hair cascading over a charcoal hoodie, her thin-rimmed glasses reflecting the glow of her laptop. The screen displayed new AI-driven crew training metrics, her fingers tracing data points with the precision of a conductor. At 28, Nia remained the silent architect of Sky Vista's empire, her 60% stake through Apex Ventures, a hidden force now reshaping the airline from its core.